Everyone, and welcome to the April 2025 Councillor Agenda Briefing. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio and video of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that audio recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, we move to item 1, which is the declaration of opening. I declare this meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m. Attendance by electronic means. Councillor Glenn Cridland has requested to attend tonight's meeting via audio link. So, in accordance with Regulation 14C and 14C of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, I've authorised Councillor Cridland to attend this meeting by electronic means. Councillor Cridland, in accordance with Regulation 14C Sub-Regulation 5 of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, can you maintain confidentiality during the meeting and when the meeting goes behind closed doors?
Yes, I can, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Items for Council. Agenda items 2, 3, 6, 7, 8.1, 8.2, 9, 11, 13 and 14 will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting to be held on 22 April 2025. That brings us to item 4, which is attendances. Item 4.1 is apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Nick Coveney and Councillor Mary Choi. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence, of which there are nil this evening. Item 5 is next, that's declarations of interest. I've received the following declarations of interest from councillors. Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as the current and proposed ongoing tenants of the leased premises, SoCo Realty, are/or have been the managing agents for various investment properties owned by my family and extended family members. Councillor Jennifer Navard has declared a proximity interest in item 10.3.3 as my house is across the road from a section of Sir James Mitchell Park included in consideration in item 10.3.3. And Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.5.1 as, aside from having a common interest with others in the district, in that I have a verge tree and other properties, I am or may have a beneficial interest in, may also have verge trees. There are landowners or residents with not only verge trees, but trees located in close proximity to land that is vested or managed by the city that are or may be known to me. Does anyone else have any interest that they wish to declare this evening, folks? That's a no. Councillor Cridland?
None from me, thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right, thank you. Item 8 is presentations. Item 8.3 is deputations. And this evening we have 3 speakers who will have 10 minutes to address council. And I'd like to begin by inviting Ms Melissa Ledger of Subiaco, who is speaking against the officer recommendation at item 10.3.2. Welcome to you, Ms Ledger. We look forward to your deputation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. My name's Melissa Ledger. As you've heard, I'm the Director of Cancer Prevention and Research at Cancer Council Western Australia. We work to reduce the incidence and impact of cancer on our community. I wish to briefly address council tonight on item 10.3.2 on the agenda briefing, the supply, installation and maintenance of bus shelters with advertising space. I particularly want to address the impact that this tender process will have on the extent to which residents and families and visitors of South Perth are exposed to advertising of alcohol and highly processed unhealthy foods and drinks. This deputation is to build on the sentiment of the letter I sent via email last week, Friday the 11th of April, to the Mayor and councillors of the City of South Perth. I also provided a deputation on the 16th of May 2023 when this issue was initially raised. On the 23rd of May 2023, the South Perth Council instructed the City to commence a new procurement process for the supply, installation and maintenance of bus shelters and advertising space with amendments. These amendments included restrictions on what was to be advertised on bus shelters, ensuring South Perth bus shelters would be free from promotions of alcohol, vaping and highly processed unhealthy food and drinks. I was made aware that the new procurement process had allowed tenderers to submit 2 options for proposed licence fee offers to the City of South Perth, one with the restrictions on unhealthy advertising and one allowing these advertisements. It was surprising to see the recommendation to accept a tender that allows alcohol and unhealthy food and drink advertising and did not include the restrictions that Council decided back on the 23rd of May 2023. You might be wondering what's wrong with advertising these products. I'm here tonight representing Cancer Council and our vision for a cancer-free future for all West Australians, and we have been doing that for over 60 years. We've strived to achieve this vision through cancer research, advocacy, education and support. I won't present again on the research and evidence linking exposure to alcohol and unhealthy food and drink advertising to poor health outcomes, but the evidence is significant and strong. Advertising works, and we can provide to the City, separate to this deputation, that evidence if needed. At least 1 in 3 cancers are preventable, but we will not reduce the incidence of these preventable cancers in WA without addressing poor diets, living with overweight and obesity, and alcohol use. And in turn, we will not reduce harm from alcohol or see improvements in population diets without addressing the pervasive, relentless and predatory marketing and advertising of alcohol, unhealthy food and drinks. The tender was an opportunity to support the City of South Perth Public Health Plan 2020-2025 and for the City to show its commitment to improving the health and wellbeing of its community. One of your members noted in 2023 that the Council's strategies and policies are, in effect, the Council's social contracts and agreements with the community, and therefore must be given due regard. The Public Health Plan has priorities that include addressing harmful advertising, nutrition, harm from alcohol and dementia. These priorities were identified after inviting the community to share their most significant concerns. Key action in the Public Health Plan 2.4.2, develop management policies for control of alcohol in the City, and an outcome to investigate scope and feasibility of an outdoor advertising policy restricting alcohol advertising on City-owned property. Key action 2.2.2, increase health literacy amongst City residents and specifies an outcome to investigate the control of advertising of unhealthy foods at City events and premises. Dementia is also a key priority in the Public Health Plan, and it's worth noting that in 2024, The Lancet published a commission into dementia with an urgent call to address risk factors including alcohol, poor diets and living with overweight and obesity to address the 45% of dementia cases that are preventable. Bus shelters are a frequent source of advertising for unhealthy food and drinks and alcohol, and previous auditing of the City of South Perth bus shelters verified this. In one previous audit, 38% of all the advertisements displayed on bus shelters were for alcohol, unhealthy food or drinks. It's not clear whether the tenderers have provided justification for any differences in City licence fees to influence the officer recommendation between Category 1 and Category 2 parameters, remembering that the Category 2 parameters being the restrictions on unhealthy food and alcohol advertising. There should not be a significant discrepancy between the potential licence fee revenues. Cancer Council WA is a significant purchaser of advertising space on behalf of the State Party within Western Australia and has relationships with advertising buying agencies. Our correspondence with such agencies suggests there is a high demand from a wide range of advertisers to use bus shelter assets, thus protecting local governments that own these assets from loss of revenue should they implement healthy advertising standards such as the Category 2 restrictions would have allowed. Only last week, the British Medical Journal published an investigation into industry interference with UK local governments seeking to implement healthy advertising policies. This includes industry parties contacting councils and warning of huge impacts on income. However, this article, as well as Western Australian economic modelling, references experts and evaluations which note that advertising revenues have not been affected by these types of restrictions. I also note the proposed contract could be extended from 10 to 20 years. This is an entire generation of children living and visiting the city of South Perth that have the potential to be protected from alcohol, vaping, gambling and highly processed unhealthy food and drink advertising on the City of South Perth infrastructure. Cancer Council understands that it's challenging to vary contracts awarded via the tender process, so it's important to build in community protections now while you have the chance. Cancer Council urges Cancer Council members to consider the alternate tenders that include the Category 2 specifications. We encourage scrutiny of any difference in city licence fee revenue between Category 1 and Category 2 parameters and consideration for the justification for such a difference. The high demand for out-of-home advertising means that advertising spots should continue to be filled even with restrictions on certain advertising. We also encourage consideration of the health and wellbeing benefits of the community to reduced exposure to harmful advertising and the opportunity for the City of South Perth to demonstrate leadership in this area while maintaining revenue. These benefits are unlikely to have been part of a rationale provided by a commercially vested interest. Cancer Council has previously provided the City of South Perth with resources and evidence on the harm of this type of advertising, and I welcome any further queries and opportunities to provide that information separate to the deputation. I urge you to reject the officer recommendation and instead support healthy living and ageing in the City of South Perth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your deputation, Ms Ledger. Just before you leave the table there, I'll ask if any of the elected members have any questions that they'd like to ask you about your deputation. Councillors? Councillor Cridland, any questions?
Sorry, I'm just struggling to find the mute button there. I had one question to the presenter who represents an agency which is very important, obviously, for West Australians in the prevention of cancer. And my question is, if there is a significant difference in the amount of money that South Perth would pick up from advertising fast food and alcohol, which obviously have cancer impacts on the community, and instead chooses not to. Would the Cancer Council be in some way able to subsidise the city for that loss, or would that be something that would be picked up by the ratepayers?
Ms Ledger?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Cancer Council would suggest that there should be no difference in income and revenue as a result of not including those unhealthy products, because we have spoken to a number of media buying agencies and they have advised of the demand for out-of-home advertising is very strong and that those spaces would not be left empty. So I'm not privy to the proposals put to the City of South Perth and the difference in any fee that might be a result of the Category 1 or Category 2 restrictions. But my understanding and the evidence that I have from the research and the studies that has gone on before of councils that have taken such steps, that there is no loss of revenue. And that is why we're asking for scrutiny.
Thank you, Ms Ledger. Any further questions, councillors?
I do have a follow-up question, please, Mr Mayor. So,
fire away.
Assuming there was a significant difference between the two categories, would the Cancer Council have the ability to make up the difference, or would that be something that would have to be met by the ratepayers?
Thank you, Councillor. As I've said, we don't believe that there would be a loss of revenue. As an organisation that relies on community donations, Cancer Council would not be able to make any shortfall for the City of South Perth, but we encourage scrutiny of the fees that have been presented to the City of South Perth, because our understanding from the research and other local government authorities that have implemented such a restriction has shown no loss of revenue. However, I'd like to add that Healthway, the Western Australian Health Promotion Foundation, has significant community funds available, and including funds that local councils can apply for, that could be used to help subsidise any loss that you might consider likely as a result of restriction 2 category. And I'm sure Healthway would be grateful for the opportunity to support local councils in making such restrictions.
Thank you, Ms Ledger. Any further questions, councillors?
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Mr John Santal of Salter Point, who is speaking against the officer recommendation at item 10.3.5. Welcome to you, Mr Santal. The microphone is yours and we look forward to your deputation.
Is Jane here? Oh, you've got the slide up there. Thank you. Actually, what I'm talking about here is the proposed dwelling number 4, lot 4, which is on 7 Salter Point Parade, and we overlook it. I mean, some of the things I'm talking about might have implications from what I listened to last council meeting about revoking the overall LPP P350.09 significant views. Now, I understand the Salter Point escarpment is divorced from that, is a separate issue, but I think we are having problems with that anyway. It's only been a year old, that policy. We are owners of 78. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. We are owners of 78 River Way. We overlook the proposed 2-storey house, as you can see on the plan. We stay on this plan. That's my poor writing, 78 River Way, and the circle there is the proposed 2-storey behind number 7. The lines outside, when we purchased this property 30 years ago, we were told that our house has the houses in front of us, which was 3, 5 and 7 Salter Point Parade, had a height limit, as did ours. Our height limit came from River Way. Their height limit came from Salter Point Parade. So we are currently finding we are gradually losing these views. Since the R codes were introduced, and in R codes there, I gather there is some mention of trying to maintain existing views. They were applied to the area and it became R20 zonation. What happened to the south of us, which is just straight south, there was a house there, which is number 3, and R20 meant it could be subdivided. So that we had views over that house. When that was subdivided, the excavators came in, they pushed the soil profile up to the back of the block, and then this RL height, the RL level, the highest level on the block, you could then build X metres above it. 2 houses were built, we lost the view. So fair enough, we can't see that view. So with the Salter, still on this, the Salter Point escarpment policy was over a year ago. We did see that introduction. We didn't comment on any objection against it. And why was that? Because in front of us and on the side, you can see this, it's the middle bit there, which is a lighter blue-green, that is a 6.5 metre height level you can build your house. The one along Salter Point Parade, which is in front of us, the dark blue, the limit there is 3.5. Our limit is 3 metres, so we can't go any higher. Why did they do this 6.5? Well, where we are, we're on the lower level of River Way. We have a lower view of Canning River. The houses, as you go up Riverway, they have a substantial lift in viewing over the Canning River. And that's why I would imagine that 6.5 is allowed there, because that still won't block their view. So since that introduction R20 zoning, behind us a house sold, and who bought it was Averna Builders. What did they do? They subdivided. What did they build? A 3-storey house behind us. And you can see there's no height restrictions behind us there. So we've got actually there's 2 3-storey houses along there. So, okay, let's take it as it is. That's how it's set. Now, Averna came in and did that. Regarding this proposal, and it is actually for a 2-storey dwelling on the 7 Salter Point Parade block. It's a strata block they're looking to do. We note the owners are China Zhongxian Investment Australia Group. We would assume the proposed dwelling that they're putting up will be on-sold, no different than what Averna Builders did. But I can't change that. So slide 2, the loss of views. This is actually our view from our habitable floor, which is the lounge room, dining, kitchen, meals area. We are looking across the Canning River, and with respect to the Salter Point AS12, the main objectives are address the allowable building heights, but also look to ensure the views of the Canning River are not significantly obstructed. And it's specified in that policy, habit and views, not obstructing views of the Canning River from habitable areas. With respect to the R code, which is a 3.5 metre, what is going on here is no different than what happened to us with number 1C and 3 Salter Point Parade. That height level was changed. They take the highest RL and then they take the measurement above that. So with this particular proposition, yes, the height of the house is 4.89 metres, but it's actually cut into the tennis court, but it's still, the first offering was, it was going to be probably 2.5 metres higher than the allowed limit. Then they have put another proposition that's still higher than the envelope. The envelope is, I still haven't come to grips with how this works, but the envelope, once you take your highest level on the RL, this particular block, there is a what do you call it? At the back of the block, there's a retaining wall, and the block actually only slopes 1 metre from the not. If you want to take it from Salter Point Parade, yes, you can use your 3.5 metres, but we're talking about the block, the front of the block to the back of the block, not including the retaining lift wall, which is about 1 metre higher, is only 1 metre. But if we take the highest RL, which there's apparently 9.75, and then we add our 3.5 metres to it, we will see that that is number 7. The grey roof is what we look at. That's the top of the grey roof. If I look at the plans, the RL that they put on the section, they say it's 12.2. But when I was talking to planning, I don't think they could tell me whether the RL was the top of the air conditioner, which is another metre higher, and that air conditioner was wrongly put on there. The owner came to us and said, oh, sorry, I asked them to put it lower, but now it's higher, and it was only an air conditioner. So I said, not a problem, you can have it. So if they are taking the RL from the top of the air conditioner and I want to add another 1.5 metres on top, you'll see the whole view is gone. If I just take the 1.2 metres, which is how high this is above that roof, the council is saying, sorry, the planners are saying we're going to lose 50% of our view. So they say in the proposal, the applicant prepared diagrams, so China Uzi Watts something or other investment, prepared diagrams of the effect of the views from 80 Riverway. We are just slightly offset. 80 is actually behind that fence. They have full-on view of this proposal. And if you go to the sections in the presented, there seems to be some wide debate that they say we can see provided...
60 seconds remaining, Mr Santor.
Sorry. So we can see the view from the bedroom is good, but and also the view from the ground floor is not compromised. So if I get the next slide quickly, that is the view from 80. And they're saying it's not compromised. That will still be above the roof there, as with us. So the dilemma is the council has said to us that we are going to lose 50% of our view. They are going to not lose any. Now, the contradiction is our habitable area is actually 1.2 metres higher than number 80. And we're losing 50%, but they're not. So I would suggest the planners need to revisit this. Can I just say in summary, sorry, I know I'm running out of time.
I'm sorry, Mr Santor, that is 10 minutes and I've got to be fair to everyone, but you're more than welcome to email the councillors with the balance of your deputation so that we have that before us. Councillors, does anyone have any questions for Mr Santor about his deputation? Councillor De Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Santor, for your presentation. You refer to RL. Do you mean the term in the report's NGL, natural ground level? Is that what you're referring to?
I refer to both. The natural ground level is where they're taking what happened in front of us. But the natural ground level was changed by the excavation of it. We could see, and then they took that level. And then the houses that were built blocked the view. In this case, natural ground level, we've jumped right up the back and there's a retaining 1.5 metre wide, but it jumps up to 1 metre. And so, yes, you can take that natural ground level or you can drop down to the next, and you have to do it 1.5 metres, I understand, from the boundary anyway. And if you took the true level, it just drops 1 metre. It goes from RL 9 down to RL 8, but we're taking 9.7 because that's the higher level there. And I think that's a dilemma that we have, but I tried to present this, that there's a dilemma and a contradiction that previous 80, the view from 80 is low, their floor is lower than ours, but we lose 50%, but the planning officers saying their view is not compromised. I think if you looked at the sections in the proposal of that was the applicant put to them, they are taking the upper floor, which is the bedroom. The habitable area is more important, and that is the lower floor. And that is from that, previous slide is actually that is actually from their habitable area. Ours is from our habitable area. They have a bedroom above there. And of course, another 3.5 metres up the top, you're going to have fantastic views. But you're not, and I'm sure that's why this policy and maybe future policies should be talking about habitable areas. That is your entertaining area. That is you're spending a lot more time there. You go to the bedroom, it's night time, you don't have a view.
Thank you, Mr Santor. Councillor De Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And so I guess in your assessment and your submission to council is in effect that this will have a significant impact on your views if this DA is approved by council. And
the argument the planners will use is, you're adjoining, you're not directly behind it. But they are directly behind it. And they're not going to, how can they not lose view when our view, and we're higher up than them? How there seems to be, maybe have to go back to square one. We asked the planners, could you come, I said, I'll have an idea how high this is if you could measure that floodlight from the tennis court. I can see the floodlight, they can see it. That would be the easiest way. Could you come out on site? Could you show us what's going on? Despite the proposal saying they did a comprehensive assessment, we weren't approached. No one came out to show us what this impact is going to be. We are now finding that from having a 160 to 180 degree view 30 years ago, we are now down to, if this goes ahead, we'll be down to 20, 30%. And they say, but that's all right. Your primary view is in front of you. But hang on a sec. That house, so that drops down considerably. Probably there's a 3 metre drop from our property to that house, but there is a garden bed and then it drops down to their living area. I look at my fence, I can look there and I can see the river. The top of that house is at that level. If that gets demolished, I've got the same situation I had in number 3 and number 1C, that then they can come in, and this is where again I suspect if you're not going to revoke that local planning. I listen to that, that's good, but when you are doing your policy for it, you might want to think about the issues that we are having. And in that case of that house in front of us, if it's demolished and then you go to the highest RL, it could be 3.5 metres higher than the roof in front of me, and we could lose that view. But it really comes down to you strength, and that's where I'm here to say, you've got a 1-year-old policy. This has got warts at the moment on this sort of proposal. Do you have to go back and strengthen that? Does it impact on what you're trying to do with redoing that policy?
Thank you, Mr Santor. I appreciate the answer there. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Cridland?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. I'd now like to invite Dr Sue Gilliatt of Salter Point, who is speaking for the officer recommendation at item 10.3.5. Welcome to you, Dr Gilliatt. Microphone is yours and we look forward to your deputation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening, councillors and city officers. I'd just like to note we actually are not speaking for the recommendation, but rather just wish to make a comment, or some comments, if that's okay.
Please proceed.
As we can see, this remains a vexed issue and has been so for 40 years. So the Salter Point Community Group just wishes to make comment on the city's recommendation for approval of 10.35 proposal. We've just 2 messages to share. One relates to the unique planning history of Precinct 13 or the Salter Point Escarpment, and the second is just a comment on the development application in question. First to the history. More than 40 years ago, this city established the guided development scheme for Precinct 13 in Salter Point. In doing so, it created a one-off, 3-tiered subdivision of land houses with separate titles up the slope of the escarpment landform along Salter Point Parade. This subdivision included the top of River Way, the middle tier of the escarpment and the bottom row of properties on Salter Point Parade. Historically, view protection has been a deliberate feature of the city's town planning schemes related to this area, and as said, it remains a vexed issue. For over a decade, the Salter Point Community Group has supported the building height limits in the city's relevant town planning schemes to protect views on the Salter Point Escarpment, originally established this precinct by the city. Prior to us, a group known as the Salter Point Action Group, SPAG, was also active in advocating for prescriptive, restrictive building height limits to enable orderly development of the area. However, the earlier schemes did not always provide clear guidance on review protection. As a result, some developments were allowed which undermined the streetscape character, bulk, scale and rhythm of buildings which were the basis of the original subdivision, the initial subdivision. A small minority were able to take advantage of unclear guidance in prior schemes, and this enabled the approval of a small number of development applications which significantly impacted views. These anomalies remain evident as you drive around the area and along Salter Point Parade. This brought about the recent review of existing permissible building heights. As a result, we have the Local Planning Policy 5.1 for the Salter Point Escarpment, and it brought with it, in our view, improved clarity and a more robust process. It's this process which has been applied to the DA. So it's no doubt not perfect, as we're hearing, John, but it's an improvement on what we've seen previously in the last 30, 40 years. Speaking to the actual DA, in this instance, we do not speak for affected property owners. We have in the past, but we haven't in this instance. But we were just pleased to note that submissions were listened to and taken into account, and as a result of this new criteria, there was a reduced height from the original DA and a roof pitch which has been modified to 3 degrees for a proposed building. For us, this was a positive and demonstrated that this set of criteria were able to be effective. So, we just wanted to note tonight the improvement in the robustness of the criteria used as the basis of the planning process that seeks to preserve the city's initial concept of river view protection for the peninsula. And we commend the Planning Department for its consultation and then application of this criteria to this DA. That's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Gilliatt. Councillors, do we have any questions for Dr. Gilliatt on her deputation? Councillor Cridland?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, no questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gilliatt. Okay, that concludes item 8. We now turn to item 10, which is the draft April reports. And I'll now hand you over to the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Gary Adams, to take you through the balance of the draft April reports.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10.1.1, proposed lease of 57 Angelo Street, South Perth. This report recommends that Council considers advertising for the disposition of 57 Angelo Street, South Perth, also known as SOCO Realty, by way of a lease.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Councillors, do we have any questions for the City Administration on this item this evening? Councillor Cridland?
No, not from me. Thank you.
Okay, no questions. Mr. Adams, next item, please.
Item 10.3.1, provision of pre-booked bulk waste collection service. This report seeks approval to enter into an agreement with the Metropolitan Regional Council to provide a pre-booked verge collection service. The term of the agreement is for an initial period of 24 months with an option to extend for a further 36 months.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Cridland?
No, thank you.
No. Next item, please, Mr. Adams.
10.3.2, RFT 03 of 2024, supply, installation and maintenance of bus shelters with advertising space. This report considers submissions received from the advertising of tender 03 2024 for the supply, installation and maintenance of bus shelters with advertising space. This report will outline the assessment process used during evaluation of the tenders received and recommend approval of the tender that provides the best value for money and level of service to the city.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, any questions on this item this evening, bearing in mind there is a confidential attachment? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. So the first question is just following this item originally being brought to council, the original intention was that we had only one scenario to represent to council, but this has come back with two options with two sets of parameters. Could I just understand the reasoning as to why we actually have two sets of options when I think the direction was quite clear that we should have only had one?
Who should I send that to? Mr Colgan, Mr Adams? Mr Adams.
So there was nothing in the previous council resolution that prevented us from doing it the way that we did, and in actual fact we discussed this, the approach that we're going to take with this at council budget workshop. I think it was budget workshop number 3 last year, and the reasons why we were taking this approach. One of those reasons was so that council could determine when it came back to council, so that we could provide a determination of what the differences were between having the additional restrictions and having the original restrictions, bearing in mind that there was a significant amount of time that had elapsed between the previous tender going out and this tender going out. So obviously market conditions had changed. So I think that was made clear, and at that time we did discuss with council that if there was a concern about taking that approach, that we could bring it back to council for a decision about how we went about doing the tender process before we actually went. I think there was no significant concern about the process that we were undertaking, and that process has resulted in a significant amount of information being provided, 2 really good options for council to look at, one being with the restrictions and one being without the restrictions, and there is a clear differential, and council can make a fully informed decision as to which alternative they want to go down.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, CEO Adams. Just another question. This has taken roughly 18 months to be returned to council for decision making. Could I just understand why the duration has taken roughly 18 months to bring this back?
Is that Mr Adams? Yep.
So tender processes aren't particularly simple in the way that we go about them. They take a lot of time and effort to get tender documents prepared and get them out to the market, and a lot of time and effort to evaluate those. Essentially, after the initial resolution was made, city staff had to work through and clarify the resolution and whether it could be complied with and to what extent it could be complied with, given that it was adopted on the night without some of the parts having been discussed with the administration. So having gone through that, we also had a number of tenders that went out that particular year, big ones, of which they related to significant projects and were prioritised ahead of redoing this particular tender. I guess the other thing to note is that we have, with all of our tenders, our procurement staff, our specialised procurement staff, are involved in those tenders. At the moment, we have 2 specialist procurement staff. However, for the majority of this period, we only had 1. So that, in a nutshell, is probably why it took so long to get back out to market. I guess, we needed to make sure that all the tender documentation was how it needed to be to go to market to get the best possible results as well.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, any further questions for the administration on this item this evening? Councillor Cridland.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just following up my probably fairly poorly asked question of the presenter from the Cancer Council earlier tonight, and that is in respect of the difference between Category 1 and Category 2, and noting that there may or may not be a difference between what people or proponents put in for what they want to pay the city for differing types of advertising. Does the city have any information to indicate that Healthway or Cancer Council, it seems not Cancer Council, but maybe someone else would make up the difference, i.e. someone other than the South Perth residents and ratepayers, if we were to choose a more restricted advertising only on those shelters?
Mr Adams?
So I don't think the expectation from the city would be that anyone would make up the difference. Obviously, where we have appropriate things for Healthway to fund, we do approach Healthway for grant funding, and Healthway has for a long period of time funded a lot of local government projects and programs. However, in this instance, we're purely talking about a gap between one of the options and the other option. There is a significant amount of money between both options, being in the vicinity of $90,000 per year. However, having said that, both of the options that were put forward by the particular tenderer are significantly greater than when we last went to tender, and both of them we would say would present good outcomes for the city.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Any further questions, Councillor Cridland?
No, thank you.
All right. I might ask, Councillor Brenda-Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Is the city aware of what impact the revenue is that we'd actually be receiving from this advertising, taking into consideration that we would be competing with existing advertising? And in that I mean there are already 3 digital large signs for advertising currently on Canning Highway. A 4th one's actually being planned, and also a 5th one in the city is on the horizon. So I'm just wondering to what extent the additional advertising that we're competing with directly in regard to this proposal, what sort of margin revenue impact that would actually have on our revenue stream?
Mr Adams, did you understand the question? Okay.
So I mean, that's a fairly difficult question to answer. However, what we have presented to you is the financial implications of both of the offers that have been put forward by the tenderer that we think represents the best outcome for the city. It's the total dollar amount that we've presented to you. I don't think we could do an assessment as to the impact on other advertising in the area. I think that we've gone to the market, and what's come back is what the market thinks the proposal we put out there is valued at.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillor Brenda-Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just a follow-up question. So the respondents didn't give an indication as to what diminished value that we'd actually get on this based on the other advertising available?
Mr Adams?
We put forward a proposal for a certain number of bus stops, and they've responded to that proposal under 2 sets of restrictions. that's what we put out to the market. That's what they've responded to. We didn't complicate it any more than that.
Thank you, Mr Adams. I suppose I'll just ask a question of my own. We've heard a deputation from Ms Ledger tonight, and Councillor Cridland's questions of Ms Ledger raised the issue of what revenue the city might lose out on if council were to disregard the officer recommendation and choose a tender with Category 2 restrictions. I think if I understood your answer to Councillor Cridland correctly, the answer is if we go with the officer recommendation, the city would receive $90,000 a year over 10 years for a total of $900,000 over 10 years, as compared to what the city would receive in revenue if council were to choose a tender with Category 2 restrictions. Have I understood that correctly?
That's correct, Mr Mayor. Just to reiterate, there's two proposals. The difference between the two proposals under the two different sets of restrictions is $90,000 a year.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for the administration on this item, councillors? Councillor Cridland?
Sorry, searching for that mute button again. No, thank you.
All right. There being no further questions, next item please, Mr Adams.
Item 10.3.3, E-quote 03-2025, irrigation mainline replacement, Sir James Mitchell Park. This report, I think we had a proximity interest for this one.
Oh, yes. Councillor Navarre, did you wish to sit this one out, given you've declared a proximity interest? All right, I'll give you a moment to leave the chamber. All right, so for the benefit of the tape, Councillor Navarre has now left the chamber. Mr Adams.
So this report considers submissions received from the advertising of E-quote 03-2025 for the irrigation mainline replacement, Sir James Mitchell Park. This report will outline the assessment process used during evaluation of the E-quotes received and recommend approval of the submission that provides the best value for money and level of service to the city.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, any questions for the administration on this item this evening? Councillor Cridland?
No, nothing from me.
All right. Well, if someone could please retrieve Councillor Navarre, and once she's retaken her seat, I'll ask Mr Adams to continue with the next item.
Item 10.3.4, proposed change of use, multiple dwelling to unhosted short-term rental accommodation, Lot 1, Number 1, 5 Clarence Street, South Perth. The purpose of this report is to consider an application for development approval for a change of use from multiple dwelling to unhosted short-term rental accommodation on Lot 1, Number 1, 5 Clarence Street, South Perth. The item is referred to Council as the proposed land use falls outside of the delegation to officers. For the reasons outlined in this report, it is recommended that the application be approved, subject to a condition.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor Cridland?
Nothing from me, thank you.
All right. Next item, please, Mr Adams.
10.3.5, proposed group dwelling, Lot 4, Number 7, Salter Point Parade, Salter Point. The purpose of this report is to consider an application for development approval for a group dwelling at Lot 4, Number 7, Salter Point Parade, Salter Point. The item is referred to Council as the proposed development requires an assessment of access to views of significance in accordance with Local Planning Policy 5.1 Salter Point Escarpment. For the reasons outlined in this report, it is recommended that the application is approved subject to conditions.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, any questions on this item for the administration? I think Councillor Wall was first there.
Thank you. Through the chair to the Director Shaw, please. I understand that the site is obviously on a sloping ground. Are councillors able to have a copy of the contour plans for the site, please?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I can circulate that to all councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Waugh again.
Yes, thank you. And in addition to that, are you able to provide councillors with information as to how the natural ground level has been assessed?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, there are 2 points to the assessment. So the first part is calculating what the height of the building is in relation to the natural ground level as established by the scheme and the residential design codes. So effectively, we take a point on the site in accordance with the requirements under the R codes, the highest point of the building, determine that difference and compare that to the scheme requirements, which is the 3.5 metres. So that's resulted in the height variation, which then triggers the need for the assessment under the local planning policy. The way that the height is calculated under the local planning policy is different to the way that you would typically calculate height under the residential design codes. And the reason being is that it effectively requires you to re-establish what the height limit is every 3.5 metres across the slope of the site. And so when you take that consideration into it, you would take the policy requirement, which is the AHD level of the site, compare it to the projection envelope, which is created when you recalculate every 3.5 metres, and then you determine what the variation is in that respective. So that's effectively how you calculate against 2 requirements of the policy, but I'm happy to outline that and send it to all councillors if required.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a few questions. The first one just sort of builds off what Councillor Waugh mentioned in terms of the assessment of the NGL. Is there a risk, I guess, as was mentioned, for the system to potentially be a bit gamed by developers if they sort of fill out the back of the site and use that as the initial point to assess the NGL?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you. So in terms of natural ground level under the residential design codes, the level is on the site where it precedes the proposed development, but it can also be the level that's established as part of any site works approved by, say, for example, the WAPC as part of any subdivision works. So, for example, if the landowner lodged an application for subdivision approval to create the second lot and had undertaken site works as part of that to provide fill on the site to increase the level, the point at which we would assess the natural ground level as part of the development application would be that level as it's been established through the subdivision. In this case, they've lodged the application for development approval based on the current levels on the site, and the city's assessed it on the current natural ground levels.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Shaw. Mr Santal mentioned in his presentation a potential 1 metre difference between, I think he said, the top of the aircon and the top of the roof. Did the city understand what was being referred to in that, and is that does it have any bearing on this matter?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would require further clarification, but regardless, in terms of our assessment, we effectively calculate this from the worst case scenario. So we take the natural ground level at its lowest point and compare it to the highest point above that for the building under the natural ground level. So regardless of where on the site there could have been placed an additional metre or as part of it, we've taken the worst case scenario based on the site levels that we have. Does that make sense?
Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just, yeah, look, it does. And in terms of, I guess, the issue for me and I guess for Mr Santal was, are we comparing apples and apples because of the fact that it's sloping in both directions, both from the escarpment downwards and along sort of parallel to Salter Point Parade? Does that, in effect, give some neighbours, I guess, not as much of a loss of views, and certain neighbours, such as Mr Santal, whose block is on a lower site, a greater negative impact?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it depends on the siting of the proposed development in relation to the adjacent properties. But I think the important thing to note here isn't necessarily what the maximum building height is in comparison to the natural ground level. It's actually in reference to the sections that have been provided, and they're contained in the attachment to the agenda. The applicant has effectively reduced the wall height and the pitch of the roof such that the line of sight from the property behind at number 80, you would be overlooking across what the existing roof line of the existing dwelling actually is. So they're not projecting over and above the existing roof line such that the existing view would not be compromised.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Any further questions, Councillor D'Souza?
That's all. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councillor Navard, I saw your hand go up there.
May I just ask Director Shaw if she would explain a little bit about the categorisation of bedrooms, because in my reading of it, I understood a bedroom was considered to be a legitimate activity area, and I thought, well, it seemed by some of the discussion there was an assumption that a bedroom wasn't categorised in that way.
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think you might be referring to whether or not it's a habitable room for the purposes of the assessment. So under the other significant views policy that we have, consideration in greater weight was given to views from outdoor living areas and habitable spaces. Typically, bedrooms aren't considered for the purposes of views of significance in that respect. Under this policy, though, it doesn't categorise whether the views are impacted based on the room on which you're viewing it from. It provides recognition based on the projection envelope that's established across the site. So that's that every 3.5 metres across the site. So if a portion of the building is wholly contained within that projection envelope, it's considered to be acceptable for the purposes of the policy. If it's over and above that, that's when we then consider what the likely impact would be. And so in this case, this development exceeds not only the scheme requirements, which is the 3.5 metre height, but also slightly exceeds the projection envelope. And that's when that view shed analysis was provided to demonstrate what the likely impact on views from adjacent properties would be, which again, referring back to that section, shows that you would be looking across the existing roof line of the existing dwelling.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Navard.
I was wondering about the position of the existing tennis court and whether that's considered the natural ground level on that particular section of the block.
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We haven't undertaken an assessment on pre and post development site levels for the tennis court. We've only considered the floor levels of this application.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor D'Souza.
One more question, Mr Mayor. I just want to clarify my understanding based on emails Councillor Navard circulated and we got clarity from Director Shaw. So the variation sought by this DA is 0.108 metres on the building envelope, and then separately 1.39 metres on the height. Is that correct?
Ms Shaw.
So the scheme requires 3.5 metres. The overall height under that method of calculation is 4.89 metres, which is that variation, which then triggers the need for the assessment under the policy and the creation of those projection envelopes. The variation to the projection envelope is 0.105 metres.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Cridland, any questions on this item?
None from me, thank you.
All right. Councillor Navard.
Could you clarify a little about the line of sight and how that's calculated, because that could conceivably cause some confusion or unhappiness?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So from an R-codes perspective, it's where you're standing and it's a 45-degree angle that you're looking down. So we effectively can draw from a plan, I think it's 1.8 metres in height, and then 45-degree angle down. So obviously there are circumstances where you could be standing in a particular room and have views looking up or across or down, but for the purposes of the assessment, that's how it's calculated.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, any further questions on this item? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. Listening to Mr. Santal's deputation tonight, just a couple of clarification points. I understood that it was noted that the block slopes at about a 1 metre height from top to the end of the block. Is that correct? Is it about a metre, or would that be better explained when we actually receive the contour maps?
Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'll compare the different spot levels on the contour plan when I send that.
Right, thank you, Director Shaw. And just one more question with regard to the loss of views. So again, tonight we heard it was around about 50%. Is that roughly the calculations that we've actually come up with in this assessment?
Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have the percentage, but I can compare that. But what we're looking for is whether the panorama has been interrupted and the extent of the loss of the view of significance from the premises.
Thank you, Director Shaw.
I can't take comments from the gallery at this stage of the evening, I'm afraid, but you are welcome to email the councillors. Yep. I guess I'll ask a question at this point, because I think I've got my head around the consequences of not complying with the R codes, and then what the effect of deemed non-compliance with the policy is. But I guess for the benefit of myself and everyone else, maybe I'll confirm that. If I've understood this correctly, the application has a maximum height that does not comply with the R codes. That is not fatal, and I'll ask you to confirm if this is correct. That's not fatal to the application, but what it does mean is if it doesn't comply with the R codes in some respect, a planning decision is needed, and in this case we go to the policy to see whether it complies with the policy. I think from what I've heard that it doesn't comply with the maximum height in the policy, but the consequence of that is not an automatic rejection of the development application. Instead, that leads to a consideration of what is the impact on the significant views enjoyed by other properties. Is that correct, or have I misunderstood that sort of decision-making flowchart, if you will?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that is correct. So if we were to only consider the application against the R codes, where it didn't comply with the maximum building height in the deemed to comply criteria, we would go straight to a design principle assessment. The design principle assessment for building height does consider access to views of significance and the overall impact on the amenity on the streetscape and surrounding properties. But in this case, because we have the policy in play as well, we also then need to do the assessment against the requirements of that policy, which provide for the creation of that projection envelope, which can in some circumstances actually result in projections over and above what the maximum building height in the R codes actually is. So it's not a case, as with all policies, that they're for guidance, they're discretionary, they provide us criteria in which we assess applications against, but it's open to council to either consider that it doesn't comply with the objectives of the policy and refuse the application, or consider that on balance the variation is minor and the application is capable of being approved.
All right, and without asking you to sort of repeat what's already in the officer report to in the agenda, an assessment has been made against the relevant policy, Local Planning Policy 5.1. It doesn't comply with the policy, but policies are not law. It's in the same way that the scheme provisions are law. What is the consequence in this case of non-compliance with the policy, and I guess is the disruption to views of significance by reason of that non-compliance with Local Planning Policy 5.1, is there significant interference with those views?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you can see by the officer recommendation that we've recommended approval of the application, because even though it doesn't strictly comply with the requirements of the scheme or the policy, the assessment against the policy is such that we consider the variation to be minor. Once there was that variation to the projection envelope identified, we then undertook an analysis of the impact on potential loss of views from adjacent property owners, and were satisfied with the information that's been provided and through our assessment that there would not be a significant loss of views experienced by adjacent property owners, and therefore recommended approval.
Thank you very much. Councillor Navard, I saw your hand go up.
Well, it wasn't discussed within the documentation we have. Would the new build have views to the river in its current state or
Ms. Shaw?
proposed state?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it would likely have views around the existing dwelling that's in front of it, given the roof line, etc. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Cridland?
Nothing from me, thank you.
No, thank you. Next item, please, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10.4.1, listing of payments, March 2025. This report presents to Council a list of accounts paid under delegated authority between 1 March 2025 and 31 March 2025 for information. It also includes purchase card transactions between 1 February 2025 to 28 February 2025 in line with legislative requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor Cridland?
Nothing from me.
No questions. Next item, please, Mr. Adams.
Item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, March 2025. The monthly financial statements are provided within attachments A to I, with high-level analysis contained in the comments of this report.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know the city continually monitors its liquidity requirements and places investments to achieve maximum possible return on investment by looking at the timing of investments maturity. And therefore I was wondering about how the impact of the United States disquiet might be impacting us in relation to how the notifications from the Governor of the RBA periodic statements come out, because there's constantly these two sets of things at the moment impacting investments. Thanks.
Mr. Adams, should I direct that to Mr. Lecoq?
Through the Mayor, it obviously causes quite some uncertainty, and in terms of the investments that we place, we do keep an eye on liquidity, as you've mentioned, and effectively meaning that we stagger the liquidity to ensure that investments mature as we need the funds. That also means that any potential interest rates that may lower as a result of the situation in the US will take some time to filter through, approximately 6 months, and therefore we can consider the impact of those as part of the 25-26 budget deliberations.
Thank you, Mr. Lecoq. Councillors, any further questions on this item? Councillor Cridland?
Nothing from me, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Adams, next item, please.
Item 10.4.3, City of South Perth Dogs Local Law 2025. This report proposes that Council, in accordance with Section 3.124 of the Local Government Act 1995, makes the City of South Perth Dogs Local Law 2025. This local law will repeal the City of South Perth Dogs Local Law 2016 and was presented to Council at its meeting held 10 December 2024, at which time Council endorsed the proposed new local law and resolved to give local public notice. This report considers the feedback received during this process and recommends the City of South Perth Dogs Local Law 2025 be made.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor Cridland?
The only question I had related to an email that I saw had come from Councillor Navard. And I apologise because each time I went to download the attachments, it seemed to fail on my laptop. I assume that the word faeces has been stuck in after the word excrete, as I suggested.
Ms Fry?
Yes, that is correct.
Right. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Next item, please, Mr Adams.
Item 10.4.4, Chief Executive Officer Selection Committee, appointment of presiding member and deputy presiding member. This report seeks the appointment of the presiding member and deputy presiding member for the Chief Executive Officer Selection Committee.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor Cridland?
No.
All right. Next item, please, Mr Adams.
Item 10.4.5, Perth Airports Municipalities Group Incorporated. This report seeks Council's consideration of the options presented in the agenda for the special general meeting of the Perth Airports Municipalities Group Inc.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Cridland?
No, not from me.
All right. Next item, please, Mr Adams.
Item 10.5.1, Policy Review. The terms of reference of the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee include responsibility for reviewing the city's policies. The following policies are now presented for the consideration of the committee and referral to Council for adoption.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Cridland?
Nothing from me, no.
No. All right. That concludes item 10. The next item for tonight is item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. That's nil for this evening. Item 15 is ordinarily where we would close the meeting to the public if there was any need for us to do so, but there's not, so we won't. And that brings us to item 16, which is closure. So I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation this evening. I declare the meeting closed at 17 minutes past 7 p.m. Thank you all and good night.